Welcome back, everybody. My name is Kaylani and I will be your educator for the next few lessons of our virtual Stormwater program. I encourage you to watch these videos with another person you can share ideas with. It could be a family member, a friend, or even a pet. If it's just you, that's okay too. There will be opportunities for you to share ideas with others throughout the program. In our last lesson, we learned what stormwater was, that water from rain or snow. We talked about pervious surfaces, or surfaces where water can soak through. We also talked about impervious surfaces, or surface where the water cannot soak through. We also learned a little bit about some of the problems that can be caused by too much stormwater or impervious surfaces where the water can't soak through and causes things like flooding or pollution ending up in our storm drains. In this lesson, we're going to pick up right where we left off. And today we're going to be spending some time thinking about how stormwater can impact the animals and our ecosystems in our communities. For this lesson, you will need your drawing of where you live from last time. So remember, mine looked a little bit like this. If you don't have your drawing, that's okay. Go ahead and grab a piece of paper and something to write with. We can make a new one. So let's get started. Our word that we will be using a lot today is ecosystems. Ecosystems can be defined as all of the living and non-living things that work together in an area. Here is an example of an ecosystem near where I live. In this ecosystem, there are a lot of living and non-living things that I was able to see. There were trees, grass, birds, and lots of other small animals and plants. Some of the non-living things that I was able to see are dead leaves, fallen logs, bird nests, and there was even some garbage left there by people, and this gravel trail that I was able to walk along. Let's take some time to think about the ecosystems that are around our homes a little bit better, and we're going to do that by adding to our drawings from last time. Remember, in this drawing, we showed any impervious surfaces like roads and sidewalks. We showed pervious surfaces like grass, trees, soil. And we also added to our drawings any drains or gutters or places that can move the water. And finally, we added some arrows showing which direction does that water flow when it rains. So let's add on to our drawings. This time around, we're going to add things from our ecosystem. Where is there water? Or where have you seen water before? What kind of plants or animals do you see? Or have you seen outside where you live? What kind of non-living things have you seen? Like the sun or maybe the cars outside? Pause this video now and spend some time adding these things to your drawing. Now that we've added to our drawing, we're going to go ahead and make an ecosystem web. You can do this on the back of your drawing, or you can grab a new sheet of paper and draw on that one too. Remember that an ecosystem is all of the living and non-living things that work together in an area. So on our web, what we're going to do is show how some of these things are working together, or what connections we can see between some of the living and non-living things that we see in our neighborhoods. So here is the ecosystem web that I made for where I live. I decided to kind of organize mine based off of what they were. So I have my water over here, my non-living things over here, and my living things over here. It's okay if yours doesn't look like this. I just thought that this would be easier for me to see. And so what I'm going to do next is make some connections between some of these things. Are there any connections that you can see? Some connections that I might draw a line between on mine is I have trash and trash can. The trash goes in the trash can, so I might put a line there. Also under my non-living things, I have cars, the road, and oil. So oil comes from cars. Cars might drive on the road, and sometimes there's oil on the road. Under my living things, I have birds and trees. Many birds rely on trees to provide shelter. I also have a bird's nest here, which can connect to birds, but also can connect to trees. Now, between my living and non-living things, I have some connections there too. So I have worms under living things and soil under non-living things, and I might make a connection there. Of course, I don't want to forget my water that's over here. And so I also have a garden under my living things that needs the rain to grow. So spend a couple of minutes and see what connections you notice on your ecosystem map of where you live. I have a challenge for you. Looking at your ecosystem web, can you think of how you might be able to connect salmon and orcas to the ecosystem that you see in your neighborhood? Believe it or not, the ecosystems around our homes are connected to many other things without you even realizing it. If we go back to the ecosystem map that I made of where I live, can you think of how this car might be connected to the orcas and salmon out in Puget Sound? If you had a chance to watch the When It Rains, It Pours video that was linked in the description of the last video, do you remember where all that polluted stormwater from our roads and sidewalk goes after it enters the storm drain? In most cases, storm drains empty out into the nearest body of water. If you live near a stream, lake, or even Puget Sound, it's likely that the stormwater from your neighborhood ends up there. Where I live, stormwater flows across the impervious parking lot. That water collects garbage and oil from cars, carrying it to the storm drain that's nearby. That now polluted and dirty stormwater flows out into this creek that is home to salmon and other animals and plants. So I might make another connection here from oil to a puddle. I've seen a lot of oil collect in a puddle in the parking lot, which then goes down into the storm drain. So what does that process look like? I'm going to use a model to help us understand how that stormwater collects all these pollutants that eventually ends up into our bodies of water. As a reminder, models help us understand processes in the real world on a smaller scale, and they're not always perfect. So for my model today, I'm going to use this jar of water to represent my stormwater. I'm going to use this to represent my impervious surface, or my roads, or maybe even a parking lot. I'm going to use this bowl of water to represent the creek that's near my home. And finally, I have a little fish friend, because the creek near my home supports salmon when they're young. Notice how the water in my creek, or maybe this is Puget Sound or lake near where you live, notice how clean and clear the water is for my salmon friend as it is doing its salmon thing. So let's think about our impervious surface for a moment. What kind of things have you noticed on the roads or sidewalks where you live? Maybe it can be examples of pollution, or just other things that people might have put on the ground where you live. So I have here my parking lot, where I live. Some things that I have noticed on the ground is soil and dirt that makes the water dirty. So I'm going to use these coffee grounds to represent that soil that gets washed away and ends up on the road. I've also seen trash in the form of plastics. Somebody even dropped a toothbrush on the ground. So I'm going to put these sprinkles to represent the trash that I have seen on the ground before. I've also seen oil on the ground, and so I'm going to use this food coloring to represent the oil. So I'll put a couple of drops in there. And of course, I have a neighbor who has a dog, and she walks the dog outside, and she's a great pet owner and picks up after her dog, but sometimes people don't. So you might end up with dog poop on your parking lots or on the ground outside where you live. So I'm gonna use some chocolate chips to represent dog poop. And so now I have this impervious surface covered in all kinds of gross things. And when it rains, do you remember what happens when it rains on an impervious surface? So I'm gonna use my rain cloud to rain down on my parking lot and notice what happens. All of that oil, that soil, that dog poop, and that garbage has mixed together into this big, now purple, puddle of gross things. And when it rains hard enough, that water goes into our storm drain and eventually flows out into the nearest body of water. And in this case, that is the creek where my salmon lives. So when it comes out of that drain, it mixes all together in the salmon's ecosystem, in its habitat. And now look at the water that our salmon is living in. It's not as clean and clear as it was before, as now it is swimming around in water that's full of oil, trash, dog poop, and other pollutants from our roads. How might this stormwater affect this ecosystem? Many chemicals that end up in the water can make fish and other aquatic life very sick. Sometimes animals might mistake the garbage and plastics in the water as food. Are you curious to see what this polluted stormwater looks like in real life? Click the video link that is in the description box below to see a time lapse of stormwater runoff entering the Puget Sound near Alki Beach in Seattle. So now that we've spent some time thinking about how that polluted stormwater can affect our wildlife, what about us? Humans are a part of the ecosystem too. We interact with it every day and we can affect it just as much as it can have an impact on us. What are some ways that you interact with the ecosystem? This can be a forest or an aquatic space. Remember those signs that we saw at the end of lesson 1? The ones that said, no swimming, no fishing. These are some examples of ways that an ecosystem that's not very healthy can impact humans. That might mean that we can't be in the water anymore, and that people who fish and whose livelihoods rely on fishing are impacted because they can no longer do those things. So one way that we can help keep our stormwater clean is with plants. Plants' leaves help to catch and slow down that stormwater before it hits the ground. And the roots help to hold on to some of that soil and prevent erosion or that soil washing away when it rains really hard. That soil is also a pervious surface. Remember from lesson 1, our dance moves, pervious. Do you remember what pervious means? Plants also help to give us clean air and can improve our moods. Many neighborhoods have plants along the streets to help do all of those things for the people that live there. But not every neighborhood has the same amount of plants and trees. As places become more urban like cities, we tend to lose a lot of those pervious surfaces in our neighborhoods. Expanding cities aren't a bad thing though. We all need places to live. And so as our cities grow, we provide more opportunities for people to have shelter in their communities. And so what we can do is as we build our cities and our neighborhoods, we can build them in a way that includes more trees and pervious surfaces to make our communities healthier for people and our ecosystems. In our next lesson, we're going to be thinking about how people have come together to use engineering to solve some of these stormwater problems in their communities. Don't forget, hang on to your drawings. We're going to come back to them again next time as we start to think about problems in your neighborhood. Before the next lesson, take a look at the Google time-lapse that's linked below in the description to see how your neighborhood has changed over time. How much plant cover has been gained or lost in your neighborhood? All right, I'll see you again next time.